Right, 9:05. We'll be admitting people as they kind of filter in. But thank you guys so much for joining the webinar. This is, I think, our fourth Insight event, and it's been received with open arms. So we're really, really grateful for that. Um, I will say that, guys, like, please, I'm going to circulate a feedback form after the webinar, and it's important to just fill that out so we can figure out ways to make this better for you guys. But yeah, with that being said, I'm really glad to kind of welcome Tolu. Um, she's been a very big supporter of Beyond Education from day dot. So,
Mhm.
it's a full circle moment to kind of have her here today. And yeah, she's going to be talking about her journey transitioning from Big Four audit to investment banking. A very, very commendable transition to say the least. And
Um,
yeah, I know she has a lot to kind of say about that as well. So it's just going to be like a very informative session. I'm actually here to learn as well, to be quite honest with you guys. So I'm going to be paying very, very close attention, to be quite honest. Um, for some reason, for this webinar, it seems like I have to be what's it, manually admitting people in, as you guys can see. So apologies for that. I don't know. I just kind of dropped the ball on this one this time. So sorry for that. But yeah, with that being said, I will hand it over to Tolu.
yes, thank you, Steve. I'm actually excited as well to actually be here because I've been supporting Beyond Education since like 2020. And
Mm,
the reason why I actually like started my page was because I got inspiration from what you guys were doing, and I was like, this is exciting. So really, really glad to be here to talk about how I transitioned from Big Four to investment banking. And if I'm being honest, I get asked this question so much,
mm,
whether it's TikTok, whether it's Instagram, is such a common question. And I
mm,
really understand why, because when I was sort of trying to make the transition, it was
mm,
so hard to find information or speak to people that had done it. It was literally like the most difficult thing ever. So I understand why a lot of people want to sort of understand how I did it. Thank God. So
mm.
when Steve reached out to me, I was like, I have to do it just so I could kill two birds with one stone. So if anyone ever asks me again, I'll be like, watch this webinar, and that's just the best
Yes.
way.
No,
Um,
fair enough, fair enough. I'll move on to the next slides.
Yes, so a bit about myself. I graduated from Loughborough in 2020. I studied accounting and financial management. So I was a COVID grad. So literally second semester was literally fully online, which had its pros and cons. And during my time at Loughborough, I did a placement year in GlaxoSmithKline, so the big pharmaceutical company, as well as a summer internship at Bank of America. But my summer internship at Bank of America was actually back office. So it was corporate audit. I don't know if you guys are familiar with like back office, middle office, and front office, but you could sort of get more into that during the course of the presentation. So during my time at Loughborough, I was sort of very proactive. I made sure I was sort of always going for inside days, things like this. I was always getting involved and summer internships, all of that. I was always doing things like that. And if I'm being honest, things like that built up my CV and built my confidence to where I am today. And off the back of that, I then started my grad scheme at Deloitte in January 2022. I was meant to start September 2020. I was meant to start September 2020 because of COVID. It got postponed to January 2021. And I really, really enjoyed Deloitte. I'm such a Deloitte girl. Even though I work in IBD now, anyone that tells me they work at Deloitte, I'm always like, oh my God, I'm so excited because literally has amongst the big fours, no shade, it does have the best culture. It has the best caliber of talent, in my opinion. But of course, that's subjective. And
Mm,
when I was employed, I was in the natural resources audit division. So if you guys are not familiar what audit is, we basically do what do we even do in audit? You know when you just forget what you want. We essentially provide assurance regarding companies' financial statements. So we're more or less like the police of financial statements, for lack of a better word.
mm,
And thankfully, I was able to complete 9 out of 15 AC exams. So I'm close to being part qualified, but I can go more into that later on for those who have questions. And after a year at Deloitte, I made the decision to transition to investment banking. Of course, a lot of stuff happened before that, which I have a proper slide on. So
mm,
now I work at HSBC in the investment banking division in the real assets fund. So real assets funds is just a fancy word for financial sponsors that invest in infrastructure assets. So the
mm.
likes of KKR, but the infra side of KKR, so KKR Infra, or the likes of BlackRock, but BlackRock Infra, or the likes of Blackstone, but Blackstone Infra. So my team is basically the financial sponsors team that focuses on infrastructure advisory.
Mm.
But if you guys have more questions regarding that, I can go into more detail as well.
Yeah,
And
I feel like it's kind of fitting that you're working in natural resources in audit, and then like it kind of
yeah,
makes sense now that you went into infra. So that's really interesting. I just picked up on that.
and if I'm being honest, like when I was sort of applying, I really wanted financial sponsors just because anyone that wants to go to IBD, the team you work in is so important that I can go into more detail. People just take IBD and then you end up in a team that's not necessarily what you like or may not have the best exit option. So you need really
Yeah.
need to have stuff like that. And financial sponsors, popular is known to have one of the best sort of exit options. And of course, apart from being in investment banking and all of that, I also am the creator of Your Finance Guru, which is like an online platform on Instagram, TikTok, everywhere. If you're not following, you should follow. And I basically share like all my tips and advice regarding like careers, personal finance, how I navigate literally everything, and of course lifestyle as well. And on to the next slide. So for the agenda today, I'm going to really try and make it very personal, and please feel free to ask me any questions you have. I want to really make it as interactive and make it a very, open process and very honest process as well, because I know it's hard to find this information. So I want to make it as, you know, educational as possible. So I want to talk about how I moved from Big Four to investment banking. Then I'm going to move into how you guys can make the move as well. And I'm going to speak on the different routes to get into investment banking, the typical application process, and transferable skills, knowledge, and experiences you want to leverage on. Then I'll go into more detail regarding application resources that are out there that you guys can use, as well as a Q&A session.
Nice.
Thanks, Steve. Next slide. But before we get right into it, as I said before, I'm also the creator of Your Finance Guru, so all my information is here. You can screenshot or you can save the details. And I also recently released like a guide to break into investment banking sort of guide, and it essentially entails my real life successful CV, cover letters, like literally everything I used to apply is in there, as well as real life investment banking interview questions, 60 real life questions. So that's also on my page, and the link is on my Instagram bio as well. So feel free to get the guide, which will also really help you when you're making this move.
Yep.
Um,
Be sure to drop that in the we'll circulate that in the email as well. And also like we post these videos onto our YouTube channel, so be sure to do that. The
yeah.
next slide is also a shameless pluggy just about Beyond Education as well. Whilst we have you guys here, but as you know, Beyond Education is a platform dedicated to helping students and just underrepresented talent access early career opportunities at corporate institutions. We do it by providing resources, career content, insight events from industry professionals within our web network, such as these. And yeah, you can find us on our website. You can follow us at Beyond Education underscore on all social media platforms, and you can drop us an email if you require one-to-one support. But with that being said, enough of the shameless promo. I'm gonna hand it over to Tolu to get on with the presentation.
Thank you. So a bit of a step-by-step process regarding how I made the move. So when I graduated from Loughborough in 2020, I had gotten my grad offer at Deloitte at about December 2019. So you know how you always get your grad offer like way in advance of actually starting. So that was my case.
Mm,
And I obviously like really like Deloitte. Like I was always like a fan. Like when you're like in first year of uni and you have this ideal company and this
yeah.
I was one of those people that was like, oh my God, I really want to work at Deloitte. It just sort of resonated with me for some reason. And
Mm.
thank God I got an offer. But as soon as I got the offer, like 3 months or 4 months after, I was just like, I feel like I can do so much more. And I don't know where I literally don't know where it came from. It was just like, you can just do more. And it doesn't have anything to do with the pay. Because a lot of people always drag big for that the pay is bad,
Yeah, I'm
blah.
not gonna lie. I saw a lot of like I've been seeing a lot of stuff on TikTok about Deloitte specifically as well. Like, yeah.
Because people are always like, oh no, you wanted to move to IBD because of the pay, but we'll obviously get into that later. I just felt like I could do so much more, and I owe it to my internship at Bank of America
Mm,
because when I was at BAMO, I really, really got to get an insight to like investment banking and what it actually is, like the day to day, the ins and outs. And
okay.
at this, I was in back office, so even if I were to have gone back to Bank of America, it would be for my back office sort of offer.
Mm,
But anyone that does a summer internship at these big banks that works in back office always wants to move into front office. Trust me.
mm,
If they don't want to, they're probably lying because
yeah.
the way there's like a hierarchy, I don't know how to explain it. And the front office guys are the like top tier. and back office guys are treated, differently.
Yeah.
Um, so literally shortly after getting my offer, I was just like, you know what, Tolu, you feel like you can do so much more, like you have more potential. And at that point, I was sort of already thinking of what I see myself doing in the future. And Deloitte and Audit didn't necessarily fit into that bracket anymore.
Mm,
So literally after graduating July July 2020, or after finishing my exam, I literally started, going for inside days. I remember that year was the first time Brian Network started the whole internship experience sort of thing. And I
mhm,
remember joining for the investment banking route. I was speaking to my friends at Bamon in investment banking. I was just very proactive because I was like, I feel like I really want to work in investment banking. Let me, gain the skills, the knowledge, the experience, and everything, and just start applying.
mm,
So as you can see, I started to apply like August 2020. But if I'm being honest, I was very lackadaisical in my application, and my applications weren't really up to par. So I
mm,
applied to 3 companies and I got rejected. And I was just like, you know what? Let me leave it. Deloitte is good. I could get my ACAs. Maybe after finishing my 3 years, I could then move into investment banking. And I think a lot of people fall into that category because IBD applications are very stressful and very
mm,
intense. And it's so easy to just give up because you're having to draft your CVs, your cover letters, you're having to prepare for technicals, you're having to keep up to date with the macroeconomy. There's so much that goes into it. So it's so easy to just give up, which was what I did, if I'm being honest.
mm.
I was just, you know what, it's not that deep. I'm at a good firm and I know within the next 3 years, I'll be earning X amount.
Yeah.
But then once I started my graduate scheme at Deloitte in January 2021, I was obviously like really happy. Like audit was fine. The exams were stressful because at Deloitte you also do your accounting exams to be qualified. The exams were very stressful, but for me, I was just like, I don't really care. I'll do the exams. They're stressing me, but it doesn't matter. But
Yeah.
as I was sort of working at Deloitte, I didn't realize that I actually need to leave. Not that anything was wrong, but I just knew that the sort of quality, not the quality, rather, the nature of work in audit wasn't necessarily stretching or challenging. And I just wanted something different. So I
Mm,
started applying again. And this time I changed my strategy. This was when I tell you guys, if you look at my phone from January 2021 up until, let's say, November, I have screenshots of people's profiles on LinkedIn. I was just screenshotting people that had made the move from Big Four to investment banking. I was screenshotting investment banking jobs that were available. I was screenshotting investment, like I was just
just
anything.
screenshot, just screenshot, screenshot, screenshot everywhere.
Um, I was always on LinkedIn because I just really wanted to sort of just get into the mindset of investment bankers. I don't know how to
Yeah.
explain it.
No, I
And
fully get you.
when I literally, this may sound crazy, I would even be listening to podcasts, Wall Street Oasis, or mock interviews. I
Mm,
was zoning in. I was listening to, oh, there's this guy, amplify me or something like that. I think I have his resource on one of the pages. I was just always listening to podcasts on like the macroeconomy or day in the life of investment banking. I have a YouTube playlist on IBD playlist with brain teasers, with
wow.
like I was like honest, it may sound like obsessive, but in my head I was just like, if I'm going to apply to this, I am going to do it the right way.
Yeah, of
So
course, of course.
on it, that's where I was networking, I was leveraging LinkedIn. Like you could ask me any question about the macroeconomy and I'll be able to answer it.
Yeah, and I think I even saw like when you started your page as well, when you used to like analyze various different stocks or like cryptos, always
Exactly.
link it back to like the macroeconomy and stuff like that. And I think that was one of the reasons why, like, if you notice, beyond education, we don't really follow any finance pages per se because we're all about careers, right? But the reason why, like, not only because I knew we had mutuals and stuff, but I followed you because I was learning some stuff.
Yeah,
I mean, so like, I really kind of noticed that, to be honest.
exactly. And and if I'm being honest, I feel like I'm I was way more technical then than now, just because
Really,
what you
because now you
say,
got it in.
that's what I've got to say. There's you work on other stuff, but I'll go into
Mm,
audit. So for anyone that wants to apply, you really need to get into that mindset. I don't even know how to explain. You need to feed yourself with so much information regarding the sector and the industry, because that's the only way when you're drafting your cover letter. It's so easy to say why investment banking, because you would know why, because
yeah,
you'll be going to networking events, you'll be speaking to people, you understand that the industry is very, how should I explain it? It's very intellectually stimulating, but you also get exposure to so many things that you normally wouldn't in other organizations. So it's so easy to say things on your CV, your cover letter, or during interviews because you're zoning into these companies. So for like 9 months thereabouts, up until I got my offer. So from January to November, I was just listening to podcasts. I was, watching YouTube videos. Maybe I'll share my IBD playlist later, maybe during like Q&A.
Yeah, maybe
I'll,
if you send that over, like we'll promote everything you send
yeah,
kind of thing so people can access it.
exactly. And of course, I started getting offers. So my CV and my cover letter was top notch. When I look at my cover letter, I am so impressed because the fact that I could, that's why I had to read my
Talk,
guy.
talk your
Because
shit, man. Talk your shit.
it's so good because I knew the industry. I was calling my friends like, and another thing I did was I was making sure that people knew that I wanted to move. So any opportunity people saw, they would tell me. So
Mm,
that's something you also have to let your network know. So my mentor knew, my friends knew. So if they ever saw an opportunity, I would know about it because they knew that Tolu wants to move. So
mm.
don't sort of hide under the shadows. I'd be like, oh, I don't want my big four like friends to know. Like, trust me, they also want to move. Do you
Mm,
get what I mean?
yeah, yeah. No, it's so mad that you're saying this because obviously I kind of made a similar transition in the sense that I went from like working in consulting and I moved to like private equity and everything you're saying is literally why like I would literally screenshot people's profiles that used to work in private equity. I'd do all of that. And I remember like one thing that my mentor told me, he was like, Stephen, if you want to work in private equity, you have to like act like you're a private equity investor. You have to act like you're already working there. So I feel like it was like, you had to kind of like get into the mindset. And it got to the
Yeah,
point where like when I would be going to these interviews, I'd be talking about their deals like I was the one that invested in. And
exactly.
that's why it was easy to kind of like write the cover letters. And it's so funny because the way you're saying you look at your cover letter and your CV, the CV and cover letter I used to apply for private equity, I look at that all the time and I'm like, wow, that is a great flipping cover letter
Yeah,
because I feel
I
like
love
I was at this point where like that's what I wanted to be. Do you know what I mean? So it's really interesting that you kind of had the same experience.
Yeah, no, and I like that we can relate on that because you really have to zone into that industry. And that's just an encouragement for anyone that's with all these applications. That's the best way to go about it. Just breathe, eat the news, analysis, like just do all of those. Watch videos on financial modeling and valuation. Like no one expects you to be a pro at this, so they just expect you to have an understanding and be able to answer those questions. But I'll
Mm,
get into that. And then I obviously applied, got a few rejections, but I applied for graduate entry roles at HSBC as well as other companies. And the reason why I did this was because I was still eligible because I graduated in 2020 and they
mm,
usually say recent graduates. So I was mainly applying for graduate programs or like first year analyst roles.
mm,
Um, so I wasn't applying for like experience hire because at that point I wasn't an experience hire. I was still very much a recent graduate. So that was how my application process sort of went. I was applying for graduate schemes. But if I'm being honest, with these banks, their pipeline of talent comes from their internships. So they literally only have like headcount of like 2 people for graduate schemes. So
mm,
for instance, at HSBC, there's only like 2 direct graduates in the advisory investment banking team. So not financing, advisory, which is like sector coverage, but I'll go into details regarding that. So you also need to understand that with these banks, if you're when they advertise graduate roles, they're actually lying because
yeah, it's
some
just
of
also to
the
just show that they're
yeah,
advertising, but the interns
yeah,
will fill it up.
exactly. Some of the vacancies are literally gone before you even start because their pipeline of recruit talent is internships. That's a known thing. Like, and even when you go on LinkedIn, if you look at anyone that works at banks, they always did like an internship.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Even the way my scheme was, I had to do like a 6 month internship first before they then
mm-hmm,
converted me to full time. So even though I applied for the grad scheme and my interview was for the grad scheme, they still put me on a 6 month internship first before I then converted. So that's also something to sort of know when you're applying that if you're just applying for graduate programs, you may be getting rejected, but it literally has nothing to do with you. It's just because some of these vacancies are genuinely gone from internships. And the way the market is right now, a lot of companies have actually put like headcounts, like frozen headcounts and things like that. But of course, by next year, when things probably get better, things will open up. But besides
yeah.
the point, that's sort of how I sort of made my move, my sort of strategy, my mindset. And the next slide, I'll go into how you guys can make the move. So this will be more suited to you guys. The first slide was just more of a story. So if you're coming from like the big four, any other like non-investment banking background, there's three main routes that you can actually get into. There's the off-cycle internship. So with off cycles, it's different from summer internships because it lasts for about 12, is it 12 weeks or 14 weeks? Or some banks even do like 6 months.
Yeah, yeah.
So summer internships, because they are mainly suited for students and penultimate years, you wouldn't qualify if you're already working. Whereas if you're working, you could actually do off-cycle internships if you fall into like the recent graduate sort of bracket. So the reason why I put this as a very, very viable option is down to what I said before. Because the pipeline of talent mainly comes from internship, sometimes it's just better to apply for the off-cycle programs because at least you know that it's just a thing of converting and you get the role. Whereas if you apply for graduate roles, you may never even get a response because vacancies are gone. But the reason why off cycles are a bit tricky is because it's a risk. Like no one wants to leave their full time job for 12 weeks internship that may not even convert. Because
Mhm.
when I was leaving Deloitte, I was so nervous because I was like, I'm leaving my ACAs, I'm leaving my full time job, I'm leaving a place where I'm a top talent. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah, security.
Internship that could possibly not convert. So there's always an element of risk with all these career changes. But I think my sort of motivation is to just always back yourself and believe in yourself and just believe in what you see for your future and use that as a motivation. Because for instance, if I was so fearful, I would still be at Deloitte and not be an IBD.
Mm,
I mean, if I allowed fear to sort of, engulf me and make me nervous, that would have been it. So you could use or go for the off-cycle route. And I
mm,
literally knew someone that was also at Deloitte. He left for the off-cycle internship at HSBC and he converted.
nice.
He left his full-time job like me for the off-cycle internship, and now he's a full-time investment banker. So you could either go for the off-cycle or go for the graduate roles. It depends on your risk appetite. Of course, if you go for the grad roles, you know that once you have the job, you have the job. Whereas with off-cycles, there's an element of risk. But of course, with graduate roles, you could apply to them and literally get zero responses because vacancies are taken. And the last sort of route you could use to get into investment banking is the experience hire route. So some people are like, you know what, I want to move into investment banking, but I want to finish my ACAs, I want to do my 3 years, I want to serve my time. Or some people are just like, you know what, I need a bit more time before I make this move. So you could also do that. There's no pressure to rush into investment banking because it's a very intense industry, very intense sector. So you really want to make sure that you're doing it because you know you want to get into it. So this was also something I had it as an option, but I was just like, you know what? There's no point in you waiting 3 years in audit when I know I want to leave right now.
Mhm.
So when I was researching, because I was researching a lot during this time, four companies actually offer specific route for big four hires into investment banking. So JP Morgan does like a newly experienced accountant sort of program like every January where they specifically recruit people from the big four that have finished their ACAs. So this is something you could apply if you want to do your time in big four in audit. Morgan Stanley also does like an experienced professional program specifically for like people outside investment banking, which you can also apply for. Lazard and Rothschild also have a similar sort of scheme like that. So
Mhm.
these schemes are good because they are literally targeting big four accountants or people in the big four or other accounting firms or people that are not from investment banking background. So you
Mhm.
could literally leverage on that and get into banking. Or you could just apply for first year analyst roles into IBD after audit. However, with that is more challenging because even though because a lot of people always say, oh, surely accounting is like very similar to investment banking. It's really not. Like of I mean, in investment banking, you do need to know accounting, but in investment banking, you need to know corporate finance, financial modeling, and valuation, which you don't do as an auditor.
Mm.
So there's a lot of things you don't do that you really need to do.
Oh, okay, so it's kind of like you're familiar with it, but it's
Wait,
you
sorry, I
don't
can't hear
quite.
you, Stephen. Stephen.
Can you hear me now?
No, I think your mic. Or is it me? Can anyone hear Steve?
Can anyone hear me at all?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, wait, I think it's actually me that can't hear you guys. Hey,
No.
let me try. Try to talk again.
Hello, testing 1 2 3.
No way. I can't hear you guys.
Oh no. Just got. Wait, let me just type a message.
They type in the chat. But can you guys hear me though? Or carry on with the presentation? Okay. So yeah, so there's different routes you can sort of get into, or okay, I've seen your message. And the other routes you could possibly get into is to move from the M&A or transaction. You should move into the M&A or transaction services team internally at the Big Four, and from then move into investment banking. And the reason why that is like the most popular route, and if you check on LinkedIn, that's what a lot of people do, is because the M&A and transaction services team. Okay, I'll get into that. The M&A transaction services team, as well as the valuation team at the Big Four, have very similar skills that literally translate into investment banking. So for instance, in audit, you're literally doing more accounting, and you're checking accounts, you're doing things like cash testing, you're doing stock. What's the thing called? Is this stock something? I've literally even forgotten what stock count. You're doing stuff like that people don't do in investment banking. Whereas if you're in the M&A team, transaction services team, or valuation team at the Big Four, you have a lot of transferable skills that translate into investment banking. M&A and transaction services also allow people exactly to pursue the CFA. So it's things like this that make these divisions at the Big Four very nice to use as an entry into investment banking. So when I was sort of researching into making the move, my first sort of aim was, okay, let me finish my 3 years in audit, then move into M&A and transaction services at Deloitte, then move into investment banking. So it was very sort of, and if I'm being honest, I was already even networking with the M&A team. So I was already speaking to the partner. I was already on it. Like they knew me. They already knew that, okay, after this girl is done with her Big Four audit, she's going to want to come to our team. So that's to show you my passion. I was more like, I was already 2 steps ahead. I was already thinking different sort of entry points. And it's so funny because when I then got my offer into investment banking and I emailed them, they were like, oh, we're so sorry. Would have really loved to have you in our team. I was like, likewise, but this opportunity came and I just had to leverage it. Exactly. I always had the plan, I just needed a platform. And the reason why M&A and transaction services is very good is because, as I said, it's just the skills are very similar. That's why it's hard as an experienced hire in audit to move into investment banking, because you're competing with the M&A guys, the transaction services guys, who have more skills, knowledge, and experience than you do. That's why people in audits go for those specific programs, or you just find another means. So that's the different resources available to you guys. Either the off-cycle internship, the graduate roles, or you just wait, do your 3 years or your 4 years and go through the experience hire routes. So it's up to you guys, your risk appetite and your confidence in yourself to make that decision. So if you have any questions on this slide, let me know. And then moving on to the typical application process. So as you guys know, IBD applications are IBD applications. It follows sort of similar pattern as other sort of companies, where you have the application form, pretty easy. The CV cover letter, as I said earlier, you really, really, really need to make this very good, because something about investment banks as well is that you're competing with a lot of people in Europe. Because if you think about it, London is the financial hub of Europe. So people from like Spain, Italy, etc., everyone is applying to the Goldmans. Because Goldman, from my understanding, is only based in UK. I may be wrong. I may be wrong here. Like in Europe, I believe it's only based in UK. So you're not just competing with people in the United Kingdom. You're competing with people in France, in Spain, in Italy, in Lithuania. You are competing. Do you get what I mean? So it's not. It wouldn't be the same as your typical. Exactly. Deloitte and Goldman are actually opposite each other. I remember when I used to work there, I used to see the investment bankers leave late, and I used to tell myself, this will be you soon. But moving on, so that's why it's so important that your CV and cover letter is good, because you're competing with people on a global basis, not global, but semi-global. And it's also good to know people that work there, name dropping your cover letter, like name drop the inside days you went for, like name drop people, name drop the podcast, something you listen to, like make it very personable. And this is what I have in my guide where I put my real life cover letter. I go, like, it literally shows how I did all of those things. So you really need to take your time with your CV and cover letter and make it top notch, because it's sad when someone actually has the potential to be an amazing banker, or because they didn't take their CV or cover letter seriously, they've lost out on the game. For me, it's a bit annoying because it's like, oh, this person has so much potential, but they were just slightly lackadaisical. And another thing to also know is that when you're doing your CV, please only include relevant skills and experiences. I was looking at someone's CV and they were putting things like stock count. No, 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 no. Because when you're an investment banker, you're not counting inventory. Because if people are not familiar, the big four, you do things like stock count as an auditor, like only put relevant things. Don't put things like cash testing because when you're doing investment bank, you're not doing things like that. So put things that are very relatable, like valuations, or if you ever came across a model, or if you ever looked at the derivative side of things, or the equity or the debt. Those are the things that if a recruiter looks at your CV, those things naturally pop because that's what you do in investment banking. You're either advising companies on IPOs or debt financing or M&A advisory. So only put transferable and relevant stuff. Don't just put things on your CV because you feel like, oh, you have a big name, Deloitte, and you'd automatically get entry. It's wrong because people from other banks are applying to even move to other banks, and naturally they'll prefer someone that, let's say, worked at, let's say, Lazard and wants to move into Goldman, than someone that worked at Deloitte, PwC, and wants to move into Goldman. So you really need to push your case why, even though you're from the big four, from a non-accounting background, you still have the right skills, you still have the right experience, you still have the right knowledge to compete with people from other banks, etc. So really make your CV and cover letter amazing. And with interviews, if I'm being honest, guys, this for me is the hardest part of the process. Like when people talk about technical interviews, they're not lying. It's actually like some of the questions I was getting asked, I was like, come on. You're like, you're like, come on, like, do you really expect me to know this? But the thing is that a lot of people, if I'm being honest with you, a lot of people that work in investment banking now, they've always had this as their dream from like when they were 16. So they have been preparing, like they have been preparing these technicals. And that's why when you actually start working in investment banking, everyone already sort of knows their stuff because they've been prepping for time. People don't like when you work in investment banking, you can't ask a question like what is market cap because you should know what that is because you should have been knowing. I don't know how to explain this. Like because when I was at Big Four, of course I did accounting as a degree, so I knew what things like payables, receivables was. Or I knew things like provision for doubtful debt. I was very familiar with accounting terminology because I studied the degree. But people from like non-business backgrounds used to ask questions like that, and it was okay at the Big Four because that's the environment of the big four. They want to groom you from the bottom up. Like they want to literally train you. Whereas in investment banking, it's like that, but you almost have to already come at a certain level. I don't know how to explain it. Like you have to come with foundation knowledge and a good, strong foundation because when you're in your first, you're already getting put on live deals. You're already making slides on valuations or things like that. So you really need to have a sort of foundation level understanding. And that's why during interviews, they really go in on your technicals. And because you rehearse so much for your technical interviews, you more or less will know these things when you start working. So one thing I definitely did, as I said, I use Wall Street Oasis. Their podcast is amazing. I'll literally listen to like mock interviews. There's this guy on YouTube, and I have his YouTube channel on another slide. He will literally walk you through how to answer these questions. Literally, he'll walk you through how to answer why investment banking, why the company. So I was soaking up all these things. I was literally some days I'll just be working at Deloitte and I'll just write why investment banking because it just used to come out of me so naturally because I had soaked up so much. It sounds crazy, but these were the lengths I was going to because I knew that I was competing with people who had been practicing for 3 years, literally from like when they were in first year, second year, because I applied for grad schemes, right? So I was competing with grads, and these people have been rehearsing from their first year, whereas I've just started planning for like 9 months. So they would ask you things regarding the industry, macroeconomy. I got asked things like, oh, this even gives me anxiety even just thinking about it. I got asked things like how many electric vehicles are being produced in this country, like walk me through how BMW's financial statements would look, or what is beta, what does it mean, how is it derived? You've been asked formulas and calculations. They'll ask you things like if this happens to the financial statement, what will be the impact if this happens to the income statement, what will be the impact of the balance sheet, and very, very technical accounting questions. But I think one thing I'll tell you guys is don't let this scare you. Because I remember when I wanted to make the transition, I spoke to a girl in investment banking and she made me so scared because she was like, the technical questions are so hard. It's so this is, and she really threw me off. So anytime I advise people, I'm like, don't let it throw you off, because if somebody is second year can learn these technicals and get a summer internship, you can actually do it as well. The thing is just that you actually have to just dedicate time. So people are trying to block people are trying to block blessings, honestly. So don't let it deter you. Like, even though I'm saying, oh, it was hard, I still passed, I still pulled through, and I still answered these technicals. And I was reading, there's also a book, 400 investment banking questions and answers. I was cramming. I wouldn't lie to you guys. There were some things I didn't understand. I just crammed it. I was like, you just have to do this for the interview. Just cram it. I remember I was attending trainings during the weekend. City Investment. I don't know if anyone's familiar with them. They run like trainings regarding like financial modeling and valuation. I was attending those trainings. I was just doing everything I could within my capacity to prepare for these technical interviews. And thankfully it worked. So they are difficult, but don't let anyone lie to you and say it's impossible or you need like if people would have studied arts can know these technicals, you can as well. So just make sure you just put it. It requires a lot of time and a lot of podcasts, a lot of YouTube videos, but it's very doable. And once you scale through technical interviews and you get to the assessment center, it's pretty much not too bad. Of course, during your assessment center, you probably have another interview with like maybe an MD or a director, and sometimes it's technical, sometimes it's more personable. I remember for HSBC, I had rounds of interviews. So I had an interview with everyone in my team, so VP, MDs, and that usually happens with some banks or maybe not. And it's just to make sure that the culture, like you are also culture fits. Do you get what I mean? Um, so yes, that's like the main sort of process of applications: application forms, CV, cover letters, and then technical interviews, and then final stage interview, assessor center. And some companies have like 7 stages. I wouldn't mention names, but there was a company that it was literally 7 stages. Like it was, and they even had like a networking event that I would then get assessed on. And it was just like, come on, like I'm literally doing everything. Like it gets really draining. And 7 stages, 7 stages. It was just very long. And I remember I was at Deloitte and I was working from home. So sometimes I'll just block my calendar, just go for an interview. I remember I had college because I was sitting exams, right? And I had my interview in November. And that's when I was literally having classes every day for my ACAs. And I'll literally come late to college. I'll be like, oh, sorry, we just had something come up because I was having interviews. So it was very, very stressful, if I'm being honest, because I had to balance excelling at work, passing my exams, whilst actually trying to leave the company. Because even though I wanted to leave, I wasn't going to then become a bad employee at Deloitte or slack on my work or then fail my exams. It's not really my style because Deloitte was good to me. Like I really enjoyed my time, so I wanted to leave on a good note, which I did. So it depends on you. It really takes a lot to balance, but as I always say, there's nothing impossible under the sun, and that's just my mentality. Um, I said, what do you think?
Well, answer.
I could do interview somewhere I put that comes off as confident rather than smug or obnoxious. Very, very good question. And little story time. I remember when I was actually at GSK and I was sort of helping out with like assessment centers. I heard a director say, oh, someone came off as arrogant, so they don't want them in their team because they may not be a good culture fit. So sometimes by being overconfident, it could come off as being, as the commented by Tiffany, it could come off as being, let's say, a smug obnoxious. And it's quite annoying because I don't know, as an interviewer, I would always be gracious to people because interviews are scary. Like people are not naturally overconfident. They just become that during interviews because that's the only way they can be comfortable. But of course, some interviews are very like, oh no, she was too overconfident, she was too this. So I'll say the best way to sort of overcome that is to just treat the interviewer like, not like your friend, but just treat it like a conversation. So when they ask you a question, like wait for them to finish and be like, oh yes, this is how I would answer the question, like in a very clear, concise, and in a way where they can tell that you have passion and not there's a difference between passion and overconfidence, right? You want to come off as passionate about the role and enthusiastic and not overconfident. And all of that is down to your body language, your verbatims, how you're articulating what you're saying. And any interviewer will be able to see through that, your tone as well, as Beyond Education said, and even just your normal aura. So overthink don't overthink it. So when you go to an interview, don't let think, oh my god, I don't want to be overconfident, and then you're now timid. Because if you're too timid, it's like, is this person shy or something? So you really have to balance it. But that's why just do mock interviews, rehearse by yourself, and just follow the energy of your interviewer. That is one thing I always do. If my interviewer is very like uptight, I wouldn't be uptight, but I'll very much follow them. I'll follow their rhythm. I'll be like them. Do you get what I mean? If my interviewer is very conversational, which was one of my MDs, it was literally like I was having a conversation with my lecturer because he was so like, and he went to law for, so maybe that's the thing because we law for guys, we know ourselves. So the interview was very much conversational, and I just went with his flow. And the next interview I had was very very intense. And me too, I was very much on his flow, not in like a mean way, but I was just bouncing off the same energy. So try and just bounce off their energy and you'll be fine. And just do a lot of practices. With time, you just know how to handle these things. How much math do you use in your role day to day? I come from a non-quantitative background. Very good question. Okay, so as a first year analyst, you do come across a lot of like numbers and things like that because you're spending a lot of your time preparing decks and doing like research and putting it on PowerPoint presentations. The math is not necessarily overwhelming, but once you start working on financial models and valuations, or if you're analyzing a company's financial statements to then put that information on the PowerPoint slide, it does get very matty. Because I remember there was even one time where I had to be doing like algebra and cross multiplications because I think we're trying to find the trends in like I believe is airport performance and like domestic travel, something along those lines. And we didn't have the data. There was sort of missing data that we didn't have. And the only way to find it was just some cross multiplication. And at a point I got stuck. I had to call my associate. I was like, I'm getting stuck on this. Like the math is not mathing. And he helped. So that's to show you that sometimes it just gets very mathy. And when you're working on valuations and models, you don't even just need to like numbers. You need to also understand the rationale behind those numbers because that's what clients want, right? They want you to add value. They want you to tell them the reason why numbers are like this. So it requires a lot of analysis. So it's very analytical and very numbers inclined. But trust me, you have the right support. Like your associates are there to help you. It's not like they'll just leave you in the deep end and just leave you to figure it out. And with time, once you start seeing the same things over and over again, it just becomes easier to do. So even me that I like numbers, there's still some things that I'm just like, I don't really want to work on something like this. But yeah, questions at the end. Okay, so I'll answer the questions at the end. So moving to the next slide. So I've pretty much touched on this as well. So I really wanted to just highlight the sort of skills, knowledge, and experiences you want to acquire or you want to highlight on your CV and cover letter. So financial modeling valuation, very, very important thing we do in investment banking because when you're involved in an M&A process, buying, selling companies, you're telling the acquirers, okay, this is what we value the company at, and this is the price you should pay. And all of that, and how we arrive at a number is through modeling your DCFs, which is discounted cash flow, your DDM, which is dividend discount models, your LBOs, which is leverage buyout models. All of that is something you do on a day-to-day. Of course, not in your first year as an analyst, but as you progress, that's the expectation. You need to understand different products. So whether it's debt, equity, or M&A. And the reason why it's split into three, as I said, is because investment banking is so broad. I work in the advisory team. So on my floor is just sector teams. So sectors like consumer and retail, chemicals, healthcare, transport, logistics, infrastructure. So it's sector that my floor has sector teams and coverage teams, which is my team, because we cover a specific type of client. So the financial sponsors team, the sovereign wealth fund team, the infra fund team, which is my team. And then on another floor, we did have the financing bankers, which are guys that advise on IPO, so all your equity, or advise on like green bonds, which is like debt, or advise on like they keep advising on financing. Obviously, those financing bankers, I really don't know much about what they do because we don't do financing at all. Like we involve them, but my team is very much advisory and M&A. So, but of course, when you're applying, you need to sort of know all of these things because we all so you really sort of need to know all these three things because when you're applying for some companies, you don't yet specify what sector you want to work at. So you need to have a broad understanding. So when I was applying, I sort of understood financing, like debt and how that sort of worked. But right now, because my coverage is very much M&A advisory, sometimes we do advise on like financing and equity raise, but we work with those teams. But of course, when you're applying, make sure you get a broad understanding of these. Also know about the macroeconomy. Like it's very, very important. Like even during team meetings, like it's a normal conversation, like, oh my God, interest rates are going up. How would that sort of affect the IRR? How would that affect, how the valuation or how investors perceive certain sort of companies? Or oh my God, there's going to be a recession. What would investors' appetite look like? And internal rate of return. So that's IRR, which is obviously a very common thing as well. So you really need to know. And I remember something that even happened when I was sort of during my 6 month program. My MD was sort of having a conversation with me about like the macroeconomy and what's happening in our field. And I felt so sad because I couldn't opine on it because I wasn't up to date. So you really need to live, breathe the news. Like literally when I was applying, I knew so much about the macroeconomy. I was reading the news and all of that stuff just because I knew it would come up during interviews. But even when you do start work, you need to maintain that momentum because even when it comes to idea generation, so idea generation investment banking is when you sort of brainstorm as a team what companies you want to be pitching to investors about. That comes with brainstorming, right? And you need to think of, okay, what's happening in the economy, what's happening in the sector, how do we put all of these considerations and then bring forward that, okay, this is the best asset for this investor. Do you get what I mean? So you really need to know about the macroeconomy and PowerPoint, Excel. You guys, when I say this is like very important, like it is so important. I live, breathe, eat PowerPoint. Like that is what I do on a day to day because every research you do needs to go on a PowerPoint because that is what we present to clients, right? So you could be the best person technically, you could know all the valuations, know all the macroeconomy, but how do you put all of that research into a slide? You need to know PowerPoint slides, like how to format the shortcuts. You need to make it clean because something about investment banking, attention to detail. If if a font is 8 and is meant to be 9, they're going to pick up on it. If the boxes are not aligned, they will pick up on it. If the footnotes and the sources are not aligned across the deck, it's going to be picked up on. So you need to like know these things. Like you don't necessarily need to be amazing at it before joining, but by the time you join, make sure you can move around, like know how to align middle, align center, know all those things, know your Excel shortcuts. I don't really use my mouse anymore. I mainly just use keyboard. Like you just get familiar with all the shortcuts. Like when your associate is doing, you would even ask them, oh, what's the shortcut? How did you do that? Do you get what I mean? And that's why I like my job because the learning environment is crazy. I learn every day, and I'm not even joking. Like you just learn so much from your MDs, from your associates. You learn so much. So those are the core skills you want to acquire and highlight when you prepare your CV, cover letter, and prepare for interviews. And moving on as well. I'm just conscious of time. I've been talking for so long. 7:53. Okay. Oh, this is actually the last slide. So I've briefly mentioned all these things. So if you want to make the move, leverage all of these. Wall Street Oasis, listen to their podcast. It's like it would even set your mindset up for when you want to start working in investment banking because you already have an insight into what is the day-to-day like, what is the sort of culture in investment banking when I'm having a bad day. Is it normal or am I overreacting? Like it just helps you. So Wall Street Oasis, their LinkedIn, their Spotify, their podcast, their websites, just love on them because I owe those guys a lot of money if I'm being honest because they help me get to where I am. Assessment day, that's the sort of to sort of help you with your numericals. I really like online tests. I don't know why, but I really like numericals. I prefer them to cover letters. So I used the assessment day pack, very helpful. Amplify Me, very, very helpful as well. Their podcast helps you stay up to date with like the macroeconomy. SEO London, very, very good. Bright Network, Mergers and Inquisitions. I really, really love their YouTube channel. I actually had Beyond Education on this page when I presented at WCAD because I'm at Beyond Education, I took it out. And please, guys, follow those LinkedIn content creators. Those guys are amazing. They literally provide news regarding the macroeconomy, regarding banking every day. So once you're on LinkedIn, that's something you see. Um, and it helps with questions like, tell me about a recent news you saw and how does it interest you? You know, um, LinkedIn content creators like that would be very helpful. Instagram, Fairy Job Mother Jobs, which shows people are very amazing. Those YouTubers as well, very, very detailed. And of course, follow me on Instagram. You know me, I'm always talking about investment banking and what I do. So very helpful. And yes, this comes to the end of my sort of transition from Big Four to IBD. I'm conscious I probably didn't answer everything, but feel free to, you know, drop things in the comments. I can't hear for some reason. I don't know what's wrong with my laptop, so I can't actually hear people at the moment, but I'm able to read what people are saying. So okay, should I come back in? Should I leave and come back? Okay, let me leave and come back in then. Hopefully it works.
Yes, guys, I hope you guys found that really useful. To be honest, it was quite detailed, and hopefully, if you have any questions, just drop them in the chat. And we'll use 5 to 10 minutes to kind of answer as much as we can as well. As I've mentioned, this webinar is going to be on our YouTube channel. So if you're signed up to our website, you're going to be able to access that. And also, we have a bunch of resources on our website just in terms of like CVs and cover letters from professionals like Tolu as well. So you can actually like, get that to be able to navigate application season. So I'll be sure to let me drop that link so you guys can just sign up for that. Hey Tolu, can you hear us now? Can't hear
Yeah,
you. Okay, yeah, I can hear you now.
hey guys.
Yes, I was just doing shameless plugs. But the question is tips for building relationships at work.
Ooh, this is a very, very big one. And the reason why I say it's a very, very big one is because with investment banking, you really need to have a very good relationship with your team. Just because with investment banking, you work really long hours, right? I could easily be at work till 11 p.m. to 12 a.m., or I could easily be at work on a Sunday just working. So you really need to have good relationships with your team as well as other teams because no investment bank, every investment banker works with sector teams, with financing, like you just work across with other teams. So I'll say a first tip is to not don't put too much pressure on yourself to get along with your colleagues from the jump. It's not going to happen. Like a lot of people put pressure on themselves, like, oh my God, I really want to be able to have a non-work chat with my associates after 2 weeks. Relationship takes time and it can take 2 months, it can take 3 months to build very strong relationships. And the reason why I say this is because when I first started, I was good with my team, but I wasn't particularly close to them. But now my associate I'm proud to say he's not just someone I look up to in banking, but he's actually my friend. Like he's actually my friend. Do you get what I mean? And
Mm,
this takes time. And the way to do is just first of all, be a good employee. And that's actually the best way to build relationships. Be good at your job. When you're good at your job, you already earn the respect of people. That's just normal. People are already going to respect you, and people want to be friends with you. Even be good at your job. Second thing is that you really need to know people's work languages and adjust to that.
very
For
key.
instance, my associate, initially I didn't understand his work language because at the big four, you're very much independent in a way. I don't have this. Well, when I was at Deloitte, I was very much independent. Like my manager gave me a lot of like, just do this, send it off. He didn't need to review it. He was very much comfortable with me just sending stuff to clients. But my
Mhm.
associate is very much like, no, I actually want to review like review everything you send off to like MDs and things like that. And initially I was like, I don't really like this. Like it almost feels like you're babying me or not trusting me. But I just realized that's his work language. So imagine if I took it too personal and I just started like not avoiding him, but was very much standoffish to him, it would have affected our relationship. But I understood his work language and I adjusted to that. So now we work so well together because I already know how he likes things to be done. So naturally, when you get along with someone by just being a good employee and just being good at your job, naturally you just become just comfortable,
Yes.
just be like, oh, what are you, and don't be scared to ask, what are you doing this weekend? And if they tell you on Monday, be like, oh, how was that? Do you get what I mean? Like, if
Yeah,
there was
I feel like that love language one is so key because
it's
that
very
like
tricky.
I actually have a video in my draft, so I was like, you need to understand, you know how you have love language for relationships, you need to understand
Yeah,
your what's it, your colleague's work language. Because for me, for example, like, you know, my manager, he's like very stern and just
yeah.
like always serious. And some people may take that personal and just think, oh, why is this guy always upset? But what
Yeah,
I realize is that he doesn't like fluff. He likes clear communication. So like when
exactly.
I want to ask him for annual leave, I don't tell him the reason why I'm taking annual leave. I'm like,
Yeah,
hi, I'm taking annual leave. Done. Do you know what I mean? And he appreciates that. No, no fluff, no in the middle. Whereas like when I worked in consulting, my manager, she liked a lot of detail. She wanted to know why and the reasons and da 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 da. Da. She didn't like high level. So I think it's
yeah,
important to always like recognize that. So that's a very, very that's a key
very,
point. Someone sent me a question here saying, what's the realistic chances of a member of a non-Russell Group university entering these type of firms? I'm currently in my first year and I'm considering to drop out to do a degree apprenticeship instead. So what I would say before you answer, Tolu, is that from what I recall, Loughborough isn't a Russell Group university. So,
yeah,
and you're working in investment banking and you worked in
yeah,
Deloitte, Big Four. So from
yeah.
that perspective, I wouldn't say, I'd say don't be deterred by that. I would also say as well, if you're in university, I think you should just see it through personally. Unless like, you know, it's something that you really can't handle, I wouldn't advise dropping out. I would say just kind of see it through. And you can very much get into a lot of these competitive spaces regardless of the university you go to. So that's just my little 2 cents on that. I don't know. What are your thoughts, Tolly?
Yeah, no, I have to agree. Like, don't let that deter you, right? And it's something I said at the beginning. Like, don't. Nothing is impossible. Like, you can see someone from I don't know what the uni is like bottom tier. I don't keep up to date anymore, and they will be working in investment banking. So don't let that mentality scare you. Something they look for in investment banking is someone that's passionate, enthusiastic about the firm and the division. And the way you show that is your CV cover letter showing those trainings you went for, those inside days, those networking events, name dropping. So once they see that, even though you're from a non-Russell Group background, they will be able to be like, this person knows their stuff. And once you are interviewed and you know all these technicals, like it will be a no-brainer. Like nobody would say because they went to this uni, we're not going to give them when you're clearly showing the competence and capacity as someone that went to Bocconi University. So Bocconi University is a very popular university for like everyone in bank, everyone at Bocconi wants to work in the bank. So you do
Mm.
have a huge pipeline of LSE. LSE is literally I don't know what they serve them in that
I
university,
call
but
them that university is IBD Defense League. They're literally
literally,
just pumping out IBD people. Like,
and it's so funny because even at LSE, if you work in like DCM, they look down on you because they're like, oh, how come you're doing M&A? Because M&A is like the creme de la creme or like financial sponsor. So all of those unis, because they prepare them so much. So it's not about Russell Group, it's because those unis actually prepare their students so much for investment banking. So they have all these trainings, experiences, skills that you may not have because you went to Russell Group uni. But you can acquire that freely. Like what Beyond Education is doing, what I'm doing, my guy, like don't let it deter you. But of course, if I'm being honest, at my bank, a lot of people are from like top tier universities. But I think that's because people just give up. Do you get what I mean? Just don't back themselves. It's not because they don't look at those people. That's not the reason. So once you have the competence, the skills, the experience, you can show you're passionate and enthusiastic, you will get into banking.
definitely. There's another question for you here. Hi, Tolly. Do you have any tips for a year 13 student looking to apply for a degree apprenticeship in finance slash investment banking? I know we have a friend that, you know, applied,
Yeah.
works in Deloitte, via an apprenticeship as well. So you can kind of shed light on that.
Yeah. So So degree apprenticeship with finance or investment banking. So I'll say with investment banking, I know JP Morgan does an amazing one. I know Goldman has one. Those are the only two firms at the top of my mind that have investment banking apprenticeship. And I think the reason why there are so few is because the hours are long, right? And they can't give those hours to an 18-year-old or 19-year-old. So these apprenticeship are sort of fine-tuned from my understanding to cater towards apprenticeship. So that's why a lot of banks have not yet adapted it. I know Bank of England has one as well. Um, and then when it comes to like finance, which I'm guessing you mean like accounting and things like that, all the big fours do apprenticeship. You also have corporates that do apprenticeship. I remember GSK had one. Other like even Kaplan has one. A lot of corporates have apprenticeship programs. And I'll say for tips, I know a lot of companies offer a lot of student-oriented programs. So you want to make sure you're going for those because the only way as a year 13 you could show that Queen Mary has exactly PwC and Goldman Sachs exactly. I believe Reading also has a degree apprenticeship with PwC. Birmingham and Durham have with KPMG as well. So that's something to look into. Yeah, that's something
Mm.
to look into as well.
Someone messaged me, JP Morgan offer a degree apprenticeship, but you'll be working back office for the 4 years. Although they've said you'll be able to apply to front office, it's rumored by current apprentices that apparently when you're in middle/back office for almost 5 years, it almost
Yeah,
looks worse for hiring managers in front office because you become
yeah,
specialized in back office. I love the
yeah.
transparency in this, to be honest, because it kind of just sheds lights on some of the realities. So again, people, we need to understand that a lot of these front office roles is kind of like the creme de la creme, right? And that's not to put down or like discredit degree apprenticeships. It's very hard to try and like, distill a lot of those front office skills into like a degree apprenticeship role, right? So I think it's just important. I do know that firms are trying to become more inclusive of degree apprenticeships covering all the areas of business, but we need to understand that traditionally degree apprenticeships in general was actually for working like actual physical jobs. Like apprenticeships were never ever popular in the corporate industry, so I think there's still a lot of time to go before it starts to get mainstream across different sectors, right? So again, this is just information that you can kind of have at the back of your head if you're trying to get into some of like the more competitive spaces in finance, basically.
I
um
didn't even know.
Someone said, Sarah said, Queen Mary, yep, that covered that. I'm currently doing a postgrad and unfortunately I lack work experience. So shall I apply for internships alongside entry level jobs? What's your thoughts, Tolly?
I definitely think you could leverage internships a lot for two reasons. First is to just even see if you like banking or you like this company or you like this division. So it's just always good to do internships to just help you make an informed decision. And the reason why it's also better is because internships are the pipeline to get into banking. Like, of course, you can get into banking through entry level roles, but there's a higher probability that you could get into banking with an internship just because that's their pipeline. So I would definitely say either mix and match. You can mix and match, do some internships, do some entry level roles, like when it comes to application, or you could just full on do internships or full on do entry level roles. But I'm more for the internship option just because you're eligible as I'm sure you're eligible when you're doing a postgrad, right?
Yeah,
Like,
as a student, you're eligible, and I think honestly, it's actually a cheat code because, as you said, like a lot of these firms are favoring internships into their grad roles over like people that just apply cold turkey, right? So I think it's like a kind of a competitive advantage to go in via the internship route, to be honest.
yeah.
Yeah. 2 more minutes, guys. So send any questions you have. If not, we will wrap it up there.
I think I had a question. So yeah, first of all, thank you for both of your times to set this up. And as a consulting analyst, right? I mean, I got rejected from the very banks that I have to work with in terms of like financial services because I
Yeah.
network my way with their like consulting like problems that they're going through right now. So I'm trying to like get into the financial services of like consulting, but like you previously touched on like specialization. I don't want to pigeonhole myself into that. So what can I be like doing and to make myself like not be specialized in the years to come?
By specialized, so what do you mean? Like specialized in
So yeah, let's say if I'm like working in a certain part of consulting and that I can't really relate to myself. And if I was to apply to investment banks and they see that, oh, you're specialized, how can you like join us when you're this specialized? So something like that.
So just to get your question right, you're worried that you may come off as too specialized in consulting when you're making that move to banking.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. I think that's the worry of everybody, even myself included. That's why I sort of left when I did, because I was like, if I do 3 years, I'm worried I may look so much like an auditor that when I'm applying for these roles, they're just going to be like, no, you're an auditor, like you don't have what we want. But that's why those specific programs for like people in the big four are very good, because they are catered for us and for people that are not from those backgrounds. So that's a one sort of cheat code to do, to, because even though they know you're specialized, they want you guys because that's what they're recruiting for, right? And another way is that find a way within your work, like what you do, to gain those skills that investment bankers do. I don't know if it's possible from consulting. Like, I don't know if you guys work on, let's say, things that have to do with like debt, equity, or some form of like looking at more. If you can just raise your hand up to be involved with stuff like that, it would help, because on your CV you could easily put those sort of things. Or another route I would say is to just move to like the M&A team at Deloitte, or the valuations team at Deloitte, or the modeling team, because those teams are very much, they like, even in my team we have 2 people from transaction services from the big four,
All right. Thank you.
so it's possible.
Nice. Thank you so much, Tolly, for doing this. Honestly, much appreciated. And thank you guys for staying on as well to the end. Again, shameless pluggy. Tolly has popped the link to her guide in the chat. I'll put it again here so you guys can access it. But this is a very comprehensive guide for those looking to navigate the world of investment banking. So I would say it's worth every penny. You can also check out our website as well at Beyond Education. We have a repository of CVs, cover letters from industry professionals, and we'll be getting Tolu to share some of hers as well to help you guys. So yeah, man, just be sure to sign up to all of that, and yeah, follow your finance guru, and follow her journey as well. And yeah, with that being said, we'll wrap up here. The video of this webinar should be available in due course. If you're signed up to our website, you'll receive all the info on that. But yeah, thank you guys so much for tuning in.